Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
After long waiting time, Jacob Fatu is finally on WWE programming, joining the new Bloodline, and perhaps forming one half of the future War Games match we will inevitably get this fall. I'm Tempest, that's Dan the Truth Layton. This is the SmackDown and Collision Review podcast here on the WrestleTalk Podcast channel. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about on one half of that coin.
Yeah, welcome to the weekend update. We've got one absolute classic of a show and a Collision episode to talk about. So that's me getting my shade in early. I apologize.
It's okay. I'll get mine out in a little while.
But we'll start with the Jacob Fatu news because this was a fairly momentous week for WWE in terms of, conversations. Drew McIntyre quits, the Wyatt Six debut. What did SmackDown have
My favorite
to offer?
thing.
It.
I enjoyed the angle, fellas. I enjoyed it.
It's
Good
okay.
angle.
I enjoyed it for both of us. So
I'm not even being facetious. I thought it was a good angle.
It was a good angle. But then it was like, what is SmackDown going to have on offer? I think a lot of people after the Wyatt Six thing were very curious about how the show was going to approach it. If it was just going to be business as usual. It was very...
It mostly was.
Well, it was, but as we'll talk about it during the show, there was enough in there that gave me the idea that it's like, okay, so this is, again, that more of a sort of long-term plan, which I enjoyed. And it was strictly, though, business as usual until your big main event, get everybody talking debut. In the opener, obviously, we're in Chicago, incredibly hot crowd at the best of times, but CM Punk is back and involved. So this was a very, very loud crowd. Punk is cutting a promo. We'll go into all of that later on in the show when we talk about Punk's angles, because this was a show where there was like a lovely narrative through line. Everything was interweaving, which is my favorite kind of show. But in the middle of his promo, he gets interrupted by Paul Heyman, and the crowd obviously is thrilled because Heyman and Punk have a storied history together. What is this?
Well, this is the thing. Like, I see this, and, depending on what's going on any given week, I will be more or less interested in what WWE is putting out. And the CM Punk thing with Drew McIntyre this week has obviously been a hot topic, given what happened at Clash of the Castle. But there have also been weeks where he's got the same kind of promo for about 6 months, since getting hurt. So when he comes out and he's cutting another rah-rah Chicago promo, I'm like, it's a well-delivered promo, but like I've kind of seen it before. And then as soon as you hear Paul Heyman's voice, all of a sudden the flashbacks from 12 years ago, and oh my god, maybe they're gonna do more things together, and oh my god, what are we about to see? At that point, it's so exciting. That is always going to be such an interesting dynamic because that's real. That's
totally.
always been the really fun bit of this. Is the thing I love most when it comes to pro wrestling is seeing how real, larger-than-life people interact with one another and create good stories. And these two are both very much those things and can create a hell of a story together. And I hope this show is not the only time we see them together.
Well, sort of to that point, which is now my catchphrase on the show, I say it on Raw, to your point, it's because I listen to too many politics shows. But speaking on that kind of thing, the idea of the real, and part of what we love with Heyman and the Bloodline anyway is this long history Paul Heyman has with the Samoan families, and actually it all makes a lot of sense. And I had never really considered, even on the return, Punk has been all about Drew, Seth, maybe one day Cody, and then we get that whole idea of like, friend, look at us here or whatever. Who'd have thought? Not me. I really don't often think about Punk with the Bloodline.
Right.
But that there's so much material to play with there. And this moment fully played on that. Because Paul is very emotional. He's been very emotional really over the past few months as Solo has gone on his sort of rampage. And
my man is stressed.
He is probably like almost, he's a method actor. I bet he's not sleeping. I bet he's like, he's left the just to men at home. They have a little hug together, which is kind of sweet. And then Paul says that they heard on the radio that Chicago is Punk's town, and Solo was pissed about this. And all the extra security might be here for the Wyatts. It's not for the Samoans, which that's the little, business as usual, but there is a presence, which I quite enjoyed. So the Samoans will come for you. If you're not careful, you better get out of Dodge. And that brings the Bloodline out, who say you can either show us respect or we'll take you out. And Punk says, hey, Paul, what was that favor you wanted from me when you were coming out here? If I grant you the favor of me leaving, what is the favor you want in return? And Heyman sort of comes over and just says in the most childish voice I've ever heard, take me with you.
Take me with you.
And that gets a massive pop from the crowd and myself on the couch at home.
Yep.
Punk's going to be Punk. He can't help himself, and he calls them a pair of fake-ass Usos and a cosplay tribal chief, which is excellently piercing. But before they can attack him, Cody slides into the ring holding a baseball bat, and my face melts with pure babyface glee, and he challenges Solo to a match in the main event. What did you think of this bit?
I really enjoy this for a number of reasons, and I'm sure a lot of it is, the same reason that you and many others do. I, for so long, had to exist through the WWE era of the loser babyface with no friends. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if they even have, people that are friends or common allies against a single force or whatever. There were so many top babyfaces that when surrounded by a goon squad like this are just out of luck.
Yeah.
Now you've got Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens ready to back up the top baby faces because the baby faces are a united front against the heels.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
I don't need more of a reason than I think it was Ibu of Wrestle Purists this past week just say put Andrade in that mix too.
Yeah.
You don't need more of a reason. Good guy with the other good guys against the bad guys.
I
like it.
A certain logic in the idea of the lone hero standing tall against the villains and it makes it look like you're strong and brave and cool and all that stuff. But there is also just something about people looking out for each other and also people, like a badass team. That's why when we watch the Avengers, we like seeing them all come together because it's like, oh, look at all of these cool people in the same place at the same time. Love that.
You can be a lone hero fighting off the opposition if you can do it.
Yeah.
It's just when we've gone through 20 years of that guy trying to do that, lasting about 20 seconds and getting mauled.
Overwhelmed, yeah.
Yeah. So it's such a diversion from that. And it's so refreshing seeing a very simple concept executed effectively again.
On that, we do get a nice bit of explanation. So Punk later on obviously is taken out of the building entirely. He's removed from the equation. We'll get to that part. But also in the challenge for this match, Cody has sort of said, Solo, you leave your goons beside. I'll make sure Owens and Orton don't come out with me. It'll just be the two of us. And by the time the main event does indeed come around, there is barely any time left of this show, which is becoming a bit of a WWE trope at this point. Mm-hmm. But also kind of indicated to me how this was going to go. Before the match, Heyman and Solo are in Gorilla together, and Heyman sort of says, by Roman's orders, Punk is supposed to be left alone, and you're only supposed to be keeping Cody in check for when he comes back. He's like, what are we doing here? He's kind of pleading with Solo, and Solo just sort of turns to him, cool as you please, and says, look, I'm sorry to tell you this, Roman isn't coming back. And again, to recap on the previous months, Solo has said he's spoken to Roman. Paul Heyman has acknowledged that he hasn't spoken with Roman yet. So this kind of breaks Paul Heyman's spirit. Mm-hmm. Solo's music hits, he starts walking out. Heyman comes with him. And it kind of hangs in the air as the match begins. And the way the match, such that it went down, was, I think, kind of cool for me because Cody ran circles around him. This whole idea that Solo is the cosplay tribal chief, he's way in over his head. You can wear the nice M&S suit all you want, but the reality of the situation is you aren't Roman Reigns. The crowd will remind you of that at all times, and here is Cody throwing him into the stairs, taking full advantage of the situation. Out come the Tongans and start battering everybody, which leads to the DQ, only for Orton and Owens to make the save. Everyone is out here together. Solo is 3-on-1, cowering in the corner. Please, 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 no. And then his face turns into a big smile. He starts laughing. And from behind comes this absolute Hulk of a guy. And it's Jacob Fatu, who decimates all three, while the commentary are selling it mega, shouting things like, Solo, what have you done? Why have you brought him here? Referencing that he's the family member that the sane ones want nothing to do with, really putting him over as this absolute crazy, unhinged person, while the crowd are chanting, holy S. Samoan drops Owens on the stairs, spears Orton through the barricade, which doesn't fully break, and that almost weirdly sold it even more for me because it made it feel like it was just pure adrenaline. And then Cody manages to get a couple of licks back in because he's the champ and he should, but he's overwhelmed really by the sort of surprise. Fatu's strength gets placed on the table, and Jacob Fatu does a splash all the way from the top rope over onto the table and pulls this face, this pure wild Samoan Umaga face of crazed fury as the show goes off the air. This was a massive debut, a massive presentation, and I thought it was super effective.
Well, I think the presentation of it was clearly super effective. It was an introduction of a new character being put over the entire field of top baby faces on SmackDown, including the WWE champion. So immediately, just on paper, that's a thumbs up. What this does for me is, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you out there in TV land do know this, but Jacob Fatu is the best working member of this family.
Okay, well, so here's the thing. I don't. And we did a joke. There is a common meme on the internet at the moment about video packages, and did a video package to introduce me to this person. I know names, right? I know Tonga Loa. I know Tama Tonga. I know Jacob Fatu by name. I'm not necessarily familiar with their work. So tell me about this.
This is the thing. When I've seen the Tongans come in, I've been like, you know, they can have good matches. I think they've been presented very well so far. Honestly, I think Tama Tonga has done very well for himself. But I did have that reservation of like, don't know how many other matches I'm going to be excited for. And so it's taken a bit of a climb for me to get to the point where, you have a big, crazy tag match or six-man tag or whatever at the pay-per-view, and it's carnage and it's great. It's taken a while for me to get excited about that. Jacob Fatu comes in, and immediately I'm like, there's your SummerSlam main event, and it's going to be awesome. Because Jacob Fatu has been wrestling in MLW primarily for the last number of years, has been on WWE's radar, but they didn't want to touch him previously because of reasons and such, but he's in there now. And he is the best working member of this family. Obviously, people are going to point to Roman Reigns and such because he has the big main event matches and is great. But he's got his style, which is a lot more walk and talk and that sort of thing.
There are a bunch of different styles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With bells and whistles and the WWE, machine making them as good as they are. And don't get me wrong, Roman's a fantastic wrestler. We've seen that time and time again over the course of that 3.5-year reign. But in terms of just put a guy on TV, give him 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be the main event slot, although I imagine this will be. Jacob Fatu is the best working member of this family. He's going to have the best matches. I have the most faith in him to deliver and actually rise to the occasion, which is why when you start to see like, oh, is Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa going to be like your title match at Money in the Bank and everything? I'm seeing a lot of people online being like, no, thank you, because I still don't think Solo's quite there yet.
He's not there. He's good.
Jacob Fatu is.
Right.
And he can step right in, and you don't need to send him to NXT. People are talking about Hechicero from New Japan, Tala Tonga, as he's potentially being known in WWE if he comes in. He may be going to NXT for a bit of a tune-up because maybe he needs it. Jacob Fatu doesn't need it. He is the guy. And it makes me really excited seeing this storyline progress because of everything that we've seen on this show, where you've got Roman Reigns being teased, where when he comes back, probably at SummerSlam, Roman Reigns is being teased, and not only in the way that Solo Sikoa is too big for his britches, he's stepping up and overstepping his boundaries and such, but there is like a sort of Bullet Club, Kota Ibushi kind of thing going on here, where the leader has said, you do what you want, renegades, whatever, but you don't touch him. And some asshole in the group, in this case Solo, in that case Cody Rhodes, went and touched the guy that the leader told him not to touch. So now it's not even just, oh, you're too big for your britches. Now you're directly disobeying the order of the guy who, for one reason or another, has a personal attachment. You don't do that. Whether in this case it's Paul Heyman and CM Punk's history, and you don't go after CM Punk because there's reasons there, or Cody Rhodes because he's mine.
Yeah.
Solo Sikoa is now doing that and setting up matches now. Potentially, I'd like to really see Cody Rhodes and Jacob Fatu have a big match, hopefully in the main event of SummerSlam. Sounds awesome to me. That all gives me excited for things going through the summer. And it's making me more excited because eventually you're going to get what I imagine is going to be a very good War Games match between all these fellows. And Jacob Fatu's going to be in there doing crazy ass shit then too.
There is an element of this where I always say, let's do this bit before we get to the next bit. Like, let's stop thinking ourselves right the way to next WrestleMania, the WrestleMania after, which is the way we like to do it as fans. You know, we're here on the Raw after Mania. We get all the ultra chats in of people being like, so Mania 41, I'll do this. And I'm like, can we get to like Backlash first? But there is something about this and everything that you've just described where I can't help but think of generational pops. That is going to be when Roman Reigns' music hits, if Sami Zayn is announced as the Bloodline's fourth member against the Bloodline Wolfpack, like, there's something about the plotting of this that makes me giddy. And I think that's something that as wrestling fans we haven't really felt loads of until the past couple of years. And that's as WWE fans specifically, there's been plenty of reasons to be giddy on the AW side for years. Not this week, but previously. So it's like, you know, it's lovely. It's great. It's really effective storytelling. I'm thinking of, you know, my main event of SummerSlam initial pitch right now would be maybe it is the Tongans and Jacob against Cody, Orton, and RKO, and in a trios match. The title doesn't necessarily even have to be anywhere near a picture. And Solo sort of there doing this, and the good guys get the win, but the Bloodline do a beatdown at the end of it, and that's when Roman comes out and he's furious and something. I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking of that moment, that like initial beat hits of his music, what people are gonna do, and this is why we were clamoring so much for that belt to move on, because this story feels like it is progressing massively.
Yes.
In a way that makes us so ready. And I think that is a credit to the team. Apparently there's a new head writer over on SmackDown, and if this was their first show, congrats. Yeah, I thought this was great.
It's just an exciting angle, and like, I was really struggling with WWE in the back half of last year, as I know many people were, because there were so few things to really get excited about. When you tune into Raw and there's no, like, you tune into Raw or you tune into SmackDown, and you tune into SmackDown and Roman Reigns isn't there, and your storyline beats just don't really exist at that point. You're just kind of treading water until the next thing. And a show in a vacuum might be good. You might get a good episode of SmackDown with some good matches, or ditto over on Raw. You'd get some good matches. But for a long time there was a real absence of a hook. You know, the thing that makes you excited, where it's just like, as soon as the show ends, you want to watch the next one. And honestly, I think that's a big part of what is missing in AEW right now. Is there are some things, some acts on the show that I'm really into and such, but when I watch their segment, I'm like, cool, I saw it. And it doesn't make me go, what am I going to see them do next week?
It's the difference between,
This is what you get in WWE, though, right now. With this debut and this progression of the Bloodline from where we were at WrestleMania to now, you know, I may not have been with it every single step of the way because I needed them to prove it to me and such. Not that I'm their audience, but we're getting to the point now where they do have the hook. I want to see what Jacob Fatu is going to do on next week's show. I want to see what this tease from Solo Sikoa to Paul Heyman means. And we're getting closer to big shows happening in the summer, so I'm starting to believe that we'll probably start to get some answers. It's just an exciting little dynamic, and one that I think is very important for weekly pro wrestling.
Yeah, because it's the difference, isn't it, between like I'll listen to a podcast review of the show, and that's the way I keep up with the story ahead of the pay-per-view, or I'll maybe seek out a segment, like you said, for the wrestler I like on YouTube, or I'm so excited to watch the full show. I'm going to sit down and press play and watch it, ad breaks and all, which is what I did this week. And it's like so, like as in I normally watch it on a Monday before we do the show. I sat down and watched it on Saturday because I was excited. I'm probably going to do that again this weekend.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like you get those pulls into the show. Yeah, massively successful segment. The rest of the show was just as eventful, if I can be completely honest. We opened with a recap of Clash at the Castle, which feels ages ago, and a rundown of McIntyre quitting on Raw. Punk's out here cutting a promo about feeling the pressure. As he's coming to the ring, the guy who grabbed him and shouted Chicago during the Survivor Series, he's there. Like, it's almost like he's part of Punk's story now.
I want to know how these people end up with like the exact same seats.
Yeah, it's
every
wild.
time,
It's wild.
You know.
He's cutting a promo about feeling pressure and how he feels it every time he hears the static and comes out, especially when he's in his hometown. And how in 2011 he promised that he was going to win the title in his hometown, and he delivered. Meanwhile, Drew McIntyre couldn't. He kind of does a little call and response with the crowd, asking them whether they think he screwed McIntyre. They say no, obviously, because they're Chicagoans. That's when we get the Heyman interruption segment. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But yeah, the this part of the promo.
Yeah, I mean, it's surreal in a lot of ways, because seeing CM Punk in Chicago, you know, it's him in his purest form, and Chicago remains one of the best wrestling cities in the world and everything. And just hearing him talk about Money in the Bank as if I could snap my fingers and be right back. Like, I remember watching that show live, and there it was, and everything happening in real time, and here we are 13 years later, and it's like, oh, God.
With everything that's happened in between.
Everything. Like, I'm watching this, and I was just like, I bet so many of these people are the same ones that were there at the United Center, the first Rampage when he came out, or his first Rampage, you know what I mean?
The first dance.
The first dance, or at the All Out show, or at the promo that he did with MJF, and all the different things that we've gotten, or his return to Collision, the first Collision episode in Chicago. All these people taking this little weird-ass ride with Phil.
Yeah.
You know? And now here he is, and my brain still hasn't calibrated seeing him in a WWE ring again. It's getting close to a year, but it's not...
He's had one match.
Yeah. You know. It's bizarre.
It is.
It's never going to be unbizarre to me.
No, and I sometimes think about that. The reason I mentioned the guy shouting Chicago is because I still watch his return.
Yeah.
Like, regularly. There's nothing in my life better than that sound. The sound of the crowds going. Like, whether that's like because Taylor Swift did a surprise song at Wembley, or because CM Punk returned in Chicago. Like,
or because Dave Grohl said something mean about Taylor Swift.
Did he?
Yeah.
There's no need to throw shade.
It was mild. But
I say,
like, the Swifties have.
What did he say?
He'd
So,
said.
for context, Taylor Swift is in Wembley at the moment. The Foo Fighters were here over the weekend at the London Stadium on the other side of town.
Yeah.
So it's a good way of being like something for the girls and something for the dads.
Hey, I was at the Foo Fighters concert.
I was one of the girls. So.
Yeah. But he said something like he brought up Taylor Swift playing at Wembley. And people booed, and he went, "Oh, hey, careful now. You don't want to get the Swifties on you. Like, you don't want to mess with Taylor Swift. You know, she's over there having her Eras tour." And we like to call this the Errors tour, because we've had a bunch of eras. We've had a bunch of errors because we play our music live. Oh! And yeah, Twitter on Taylor Swift's side does not like that today.
Well, that's because Twitter doesn't like anything.
That's true.
But that's funny shade. Shade comes from reading.
Dave
Anyway,
Grohl, my hero.
I like Tayller Swift. We're gonna move on to
That's the Foo Fighters song. So
out of the Foo Fighters as well. Where was I? I've been distracted by. Oh yeah. So then the Bloodline come out. Then we go into. I got annoyed quite quickly here. So backstage, Jade Cargill is talking to Bianca Belair before her match, saying that she knows right now is about Money in the Bank, but she's ready to get their tag titles back. And maybe it was just me, but Bianca Belair seemed a little bit less interested than Jade was, probably because she's focused on the match, but is that something storyline-wise we want to play with? I don't know. Bianca makes her entrance. We cut to commercial. back from commercial, the bell immediately rings, and neither Michin nor Chelsea Green have gotten an entrance or an introduction. And I was pissed off at this.
It took me a moment to figure out who was in this match.
Only because I've been in NXT land for a little while, and so has Michin, who has had a style change. Was I able to go, there's Michin. If you're not watching, she had blue hair a minute ago. Do you know? So it was just like a jarring and like a, that's really annoying. Put a pin in that, though, because it sort of became a theme of the show. It was a decent match, could have been a little bit tighter, but the build to the finish I thought was quite good, with Michin getting a few eat defeats in. She hit one on Bianca, who rolled out of the ring, so Michin hits a Styles Clash on Chelsea Green for a near fall. Then Bianca slides in and hits a KOD on Michin. Green picks Bianca up, throws her to the outside, and steals the win by pinning Michin after the KOD for the 1-2-3. Two things on this one. First of all, this was Bianca's match to lose. And I really liked that this was another example of opponents in a triple threat using Bianca's power and her moves against her, and then taking advantage of that, throwing her out of the ring. In the triple threat tag match at Clash, it was very much it was Alba Fire held her and Jade in place to stop them wriggling free in time to break up the pinfall, and that's what happened here with Chelsea Green as well. I wonder if that'll become a frustrating pattern for her going forward. And then the other half of this was the crowd were on their feet for Chelsea Green getting this win. Chelsea Green has been maximizing her minutes, being the underrated star of the show, darling of the internet in many ways, not unlike Matt Cardona in the past. So clearly it runs in that marriage. And I think I've heard him talk about how it was her idea a lot of the things that sort of he's done. So she's very creative in that, and it's nice to see her get a little moment. What did you think of the match?
Well, it is nice to see her get a little moment, because, like, you look at her WWE run and, like, the real stop-start of the beginning bits where she debuts, breaks her wrist, gets released, comes back, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's nice to see this. I have a number of thoughts, because I saw this and I was like, she's going to win the briefcase.
Uh-huh.
Which I'm not immediately opposed to, but it then does bring up the potential issue of a Carmella-like cash-in and reign if they don't do anything between now and then, which is Carmella's gimmick, and Luke brings this up all the time. Carmella's gimmick when she won was that they couldn't decide whether she was a fluke champion or actually she's a main event level wrestler. And, you know, she was either being told that she was a fluke and not a real champion, or she was going out and beating Charlotte clean.
Right.
Which doesn't make sense. I'm not talking about the cash-in. I'm talking about the match of Backlash where she just beats her and then beats Asuka on 2 straight pay-per-views. Regardless. But it was because they didn't do very much to build Carmella up as a credible person. And I can understand a reasoning behind not wanting to, because the idea is, you know, Chelsea Green, future world champion as she's currently portrayed, is kind of like the funny bit, right? Because she's this comedy character who, if you give Money in the Bank to, I'm sure will make a lot of very good content. But then the problem comes when you have to cash that in. Granted, maybe it's time we see a long Miss Money in the Bank briefcase run before a cash in.
Because Carmella was the other one who was long.
Exactly. And perhaps by the end of that, we can build Chelsea Green up and give her some wins on TV and do what I had been hoping they would do with Piper Niven before the match at Clash at the Castle. And thankfully, with Money in the Bank, you can do the cash-in whenever. So if you wait until it is the right time, I think this is maybe the best chance, like the best option of people in the women's Money in the Bank match. Or people who may end up in the Money in the Bank match.
Well, so that part, that last bit is the interesting thing to me, because I think most people thought here, Bianca's going to be in that, this person's going to be in that. And as we'll see in the other qualifying matches later on, there's a few big surprises in here. So I think I'm going to reserve my judgment on who should or shouldn't win until we see the field, because I think the field is going to dictate how the show is going to go, how the match will go. On her potentially being Miss Money in the Bank, first of all, I love the comedy of it. The issue we had with Piper at Clash was not that she didn't deserve it, not that she wasn't going to put on a good match, which she did. It was you haven't built her up in any way, shape, or form. Chelsea Green has a firm character. We know who
Yes.
she is. Her with this prop, really effective. When you were saying about finding the right time to cash it in, that is something that I agree they have struggled with in the past. I think Damian Priest is one where like WrestleMania was the right time, but actually the right time for Damian Priest was probably back in the summer when Judgment Day and Finn were at their height. You know, will he bring it back? That's the other question. I find there's also the third option, which is long Money in the Bank reign, and she fails. She fails to cash in.
There's always that. No woman has failed yet.
Like, yeah,
that's something different.
There are an abundance of choices to make with the briefcase. I think as long as it's used in a creative way and not, it has been a bit of an albatross. I felt over the past few years. It'll be interesting to see how it goes here. But I did like that. Instantly I was like, oh, okay. That's interesting.
Just got to get a big pop in Toronto.
Well, oh yes, of course. Yeah, I forget she's Canadian, because Canadians are usually nice. And she's a diva Karen, character-wise. Backstage, Blair Davenport comes to see Bayley, who has been watching the qualifying match, and Blair promises that she will win Money in the Bank and cash in on her. We'd seen Orton and Owens after Cody. Excuse me. We'd seen Kevin Owens and Randy Orton offer Cody back up, and Solo tells Heyman something, which we don't hear because there is a lovely audio issue.
We find out later.
We do find out later. Grayson Waller is backstage talking about his upcoming qualifying match and Austin Theory, who's not there this week. DIY head in, and they have a little back and forth about Austin Theory, when behind them is a gigantic bang against the security door. And Kayla Braxton, thank you for your service, Kayla Braxton. She's off leaving soon. But shout out to you in this moment for jumping out of your skin and bailing, because I fully was like, oh, it's Wyatt stuff.
Sure.
Because my brain had seen all the security guards behind Bayley, behind the commentary desk, behind these people, and behind this Grayson Waller injury, they're just sort of there. And that's what I wanted to put over this idea of, like, it didn't have to necessarily be the whole building is on lockdown, we're performing in the Thunderdome again to keep you all safe. But there had to be an acknowledgement, there had to be a recognition that this had happened. And very simply, even just on Twitter beforehand, Nick Aldis posted a video saying, like, we've got extra security, might take longer for you to get into the building because we're after what happened on Raw. And I was like, you've addressed it. That's all I needed. I don't need this necessarily to be this constant thing. There was enough there to give me a moment to go, whoa, what's happening? Oh, do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So when the door then rises and we see silhouetted against the setting Chicago sun, the impeccable physical form of Drew McIntyre standing over the bleeding body of CM Punk. It's all silent. It's all very quiet. He picks him up, carries him on his shoulders to the stage in one shot where he just plonks him on the ground, and he steals Punk's friendship bracelet. There's some Taylor Swift reference as well. That bracelet apparently says AJ and Larry, which is interesting because Drew's wife has been present in this storyline, you know, unable to be there at Clash, on the front row at Mania. Maybe we're seeing an AJ return. I don't know.
Or a mixed tag.
Or a mixed tag. Nick Aldis comes out to tell him off. Drew pushes him away, gets in his face. Punk is taken out on a stretcher. I loved this.
I thought this was really effective. You know, it's been one of the more interesting things we've seen in the Drew and Punk thing. And again, this past week has been a lot of that. I love that with all this added security and everything, Drew was able to walk from, you know, the garage door to the stage, and I didn't hear one person go, "Hey,
didn't you quit?
Don't do that."
Yeah, that's
you don't work or anything like that. So I thought that was funny, but I guess this is what you get when you need to have a one long tracking shot on every show.
And I'd not even thought of that. That is so fair.
It's funny. If there wasn't added security, just to be like, hey,
yeah,
you put that corpse down.
But this is part of this whole. This is part of the weird thing where we just accept stuff, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. I point this out not as a nitpick, but it's just like that's funny.
It is funny. Yeah.
Funny, goofy wrestling nonsense.
Only in WWE.
Yeah.
I also thought like Punk had almost been a little cowardly in places being like, I'm going to screw him over in his hometown and then brag about how I'm skipping Raw to come to SmackDown instead. So, like, I'm not going to deal with the consequences of my actions.
Listen, Drew McIntyre's the babyface here.
So, exactly. And I think that it's a really nice flavor that keeps all of these people really justified in their assessments of each other. Because Punk is right about Drew, and Drew is right about Punk. That's what makes this so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's sort of like that real emotion storytelling that leaves people to be able to make their own decisions about who they want to cheer for.
Yeah.
I would imagine when we finally get this match, it'll probably be a split crowd.
I'm going to be there like, I'm having a good time. Like, nothing else. I don't care who wins. Storytelling.
Eventually, we'll get the CM Punk heel turn we never properly got in AEW, and it's going to feed families.
The CM Punk and Cody Rhodes heel turns are going to be generational.
I don't want a Cody Rhodes heel turn.
Neither do I.
I don't want it. All these people going out, Undertaker doing his goddamn interviews, being like, oh, Cody's going to be a great heel. He's the best babyface they've had in like 20 friggin' years.
It will be a great heel, though. Do it when it's time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but not right now.
Not
right
at the
now.
expense of this run.
It is then time for a men's Money in the Bank qualifying match. It's Randy Orton, Carmelo Hayes, and Tama Tonga. Carmelo Hayes is the one who doesn't get an entrance, but he does get announced. We are told over the commentary that the message Solo gave to Heyman was to make sure that Kevin Owens and Randy Orton don't qualify for Money in the Bank. Mm-hmm. Again, the match is fairly decent stuff. In the end, Tonga Loa comes out for a distraction. Owens evens the odds, but on the distraction, Hayes slips into the ring and gets a roll-up for a surprise win, so Carmelo Hayes is going in Money in the Bank.
This is my winner. Right here.
Really?
Mello is money.
Interesting.
I mean, I love Carmelo Hayes.
I do too.
I adore him. And what else is he doing?
Well, so that's my question. So the interesting thing here is that when he got called up, in contrast to like Bron Breakker or Dragunov, or even I suppose, no, that's it. When he got called up, there was something about it to me that felt a little bit like. He's been like you were the top of your class in like year 6, and then you go to secondary school and you're in year 7. That's what it felt like. Do you know what I mean? So it felt like he's now taking some L's. He's not even, I wouldn't say, in the US title picture. So for me, winner where you've got a Money in the Bank briefcase, way too much, way too soon. But I don't actually know how this match is going to look. That's what I was saying with the women's one as well. So it could well be.
Listen, the only other pitch that I've seen that has resonated with me is Dragunov wins and he cashes it in ahead of time for a match with Gunther when Gunther wins the heavyweight title. I'm also very much down with that.
I do like an advance cash-in.
Someone with confidence, especially against Gunther, the amount of the intestinal fortitude in order to be able to do something like that. But if you want just like kind of your smarmy Money in the Bank guy to hold the briefcase for 6 months and do a few stories and then build him up and then bang, here's your new guy, I don't think you're going to find a better choice than Carmelo.
We've got a recap of the Wyatt 6 trigger warning. And then
I liked it!
And then LA Knight comes out and calls out Logan, who does not respond. He says he's tired of Logan being a no-show, but he can't hide next week because they're in a qualifying match together. The third part of that match is Santos Escobar, and he comes out to whinge about being disrespected in this. They go have a bit of a brawl. LA Knight hits the BFT. In the meantime, Logan Paul has slid in the ring and knocks him clean out with a Nux-assisted right hand. I wouldn't be surprised if Santos goes through. And that's your match at Toronto, because I don't know if you do that at SummerSlam being in Cleveland and Logan loses, or I don't know, like maybe you do stretch it out even further.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, you know, we've kind of been waiting for this LA Knight winning the U.S. title off a Logan Paul thing for a while. Yeah. You know, we've kind of thought that he was going to be the U.S. champion for a long time now.
This time last year, I was saying I wouldn't have him win Money in the Bank. I'd have him win the US title at SummerSlam.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's been a long build up of all of this. I guess that means Santos is the odd man out and therefore the odd man in Money in the Bank, which is weird because to me he came across as by far the least amount of a star of the three of them in this segment. But again, that's fine, I suppose. Yeah. It's an interesting conundrum because I think if you just take the location out of it, you do it at SummerSlam, the title change. But Otherwise, I probably would have put both LA Knight and Logan Paul in Money in the Bank and had that to be the thing that tided them over until then, but they're not doing that. So.
I wonder if there's going to be a losers a
last
shot.
chance battle royal or something.
Then it came to what might have been my match of the weekend. I don't know. Grayson Waller versus Andrade versus Kevin Owens.
It was mine.
Because I did write that, and then I felt like sometimes I say things and get in trouble. Back yourself. Trust in your source.
This is the best WWE TV match in a long time.
And who's the one who doesn't get the entrance this time is Andrade. Notice a pattern, because they mentioned he's this. What was interesting about this is they mentioned he was the Speed Champion. And I couldn't help but sit there for a lot of the match and think about how he's come back and been quite an afterthought, and how all the critique lodged against signing for AEW and then don't get used is kind of also coming true on this side. But then the match happens, and I thoroughly enjoy it. The Tongans jump Kevin Owens at the entrance this time, and they sort of batter his knee down. Orton makes the save, and Owens insists he's good to go. Everyone gets a bunch of offense, and it's during the match that Andrade starts reminding me why I enjoy him so much. Stiff, fast, powerful. He's got all of these attributes, and you are sat there going like, why aren't you using him properly? Meanwhile, Kevin Owens and Grayson Waller both playing their part, I think, really effectively. Grayson Waller's the irritant, and Kevin Owens is that kind of like scrappy do, never say die. I'm going to sell my ass off with this leg injury and still manage to hit all of these moves. And every time I thought, if they're doing that thing that annoys me, they undercut it and did something different. Not only with the entrances thing, but there was an example where KO hit the Swanton and then was taking too long to get a cover. And often recently I've seen, like, Sami Zayn is a killer for this. He'll hit the haluva kick and they go, oh my God, and now I'm going to go and get you. And in the time, they might be able to kick out, but they never do, which for me is like, that annoys me. Whereas here, I thought it was going to be a 3, and it wasn't. Instead, what happens is Grayson Waller sort of gets Kevin Owens on the outside, takes him down, spots an opportunity to go and do his diving through the bottom rope, rolling into hitting a DDT thing. Except, fuck my life, Andrade reverses it into a neck breaker, and it was the most smooth, most beautiful thing. I stood up out of my chair. I was so excited for it. And that's 3 in a row where the non-entrance contender gets the win, which feels like they're making a point. I loved it.
I think this was the best WWE TV match I have seen in at least a month, probably more. Whenever Ilya Dragunov and Ricochet was. It's probably the best one since then. Don't think it was as good as that one, because that's one of my favorite matches of the year, but this was still gosh darn great. Yeah, Andrade's going to Money in the Bank. I could again see him winning it.
Yeah.
As kind
I would see that one over Carmelo, even though I know that Andrade hasn't been used better than Carmelo.
Well, this is the thing. I think this would be a hey, shut up, fans, kind of, here, for God's sakes, we gave him a thing.
Well, I guess the question is, what's the Money in the Bank for, right? And it's like the idea of it is that you have a bunch of people circling. You want a mid-card that are jockeying for position, looking for their opportunity, and this is their fast-track pass. The idea, it's been used in sort of like by giving it someone who's maybe right there in a storyline already. Giving it to someone who's in no storylines and is just sort of circling the drain circling the arena and having maybe he has a bunch of decent matches and then it's like, oh, Andrade's here to cash in. I don't know. There's something interesting in it.
Sounds like Daniel Bryan when he won Money in the Bank in 2011, who could barely get on TV before he won it. And then they just went, him.
Yeah.
And it got him on his way to where he is. That greatest of all time man.
Yeah.
I could see it. I wouldn't be opposed to it. There's a decent field coming into shape here of people who could win Money in the Bank.
That's my takeaway. I think I'm interested in the direction they're taking, both in the men's and women's Money in the Bank.
Yeah.
Backstage, we have Tiffany Stratton, who comes to rub it in Michin's face that she lost. Michin gives back a little bit about Tiffany hiding behind Nia Jax, but then Nia does indeed come clattering in out of nowhere and ambushes Michin. And then Kayla lets us know that Punk is staying in hospital overnight, and McIntyre will be on Raw tonight. And then we hit the main event. This was a very, very good episode of television.
This was a top-notch SmackDown. I don't think you could ask for too much more. You got one of their best matches they've had in quite a while, and top-level angle to set up a new star, and some interesting fan service stuff with Punk and Heyman. Good show all around.
Good stuff.
That
so what happened
being
on Collision?
said, let's change direction. So, as we're now hitting the halfway point, make sure, of course, that you like this video and subscribe to the WrestleTalk Podcast channel if you haven't already. Let us know what you thought about SmackDown and Collision, as well as the debut of Jacob Fatu, the interaction with Punk and Heyman, or any of the godforsaken things we saw on this show. There were a couple good things.
There were, yeah.
But
we're being grumpy, but there was some things that I want to give credit to.
That's it. There were a couple good matches, but there are also some things that have come damn near close to ruining my day. So, this show opens with something that I would consider to be a highlight of the show, because it involves probably my favorite AEW act right now. I'm not super confident saying that, but they'd be in the mix at the very least. That being the tough guy trio of Samoa Joe, Hook, and Katsuyori Shibata. They come out, one entrance after another. They all get their big pops. And they are taking on the trio of the premier athletes, Josh Woods, Tony Nese, and Arya Daivari. I like this little trio as a trio of guys that can get beat because they're all very good wrestlers, and I think Josh Woods is particularly good. They had a fun little opening match here. They each got their turns to kick ass and be awesome and also sell a little bit, but you had Shibata teeing off with Josh Woods, which is an interesting little matchup that I feel like we probably should have seen for like a Ring of Honor belt when Shibata was in Ring of Honor a little bit more, but I don't think that we did. Maybe we did and I've just forgotten. Regardless, they have a similar technical style, but also a hard-hitting style, so they complemented each other very nicely. Shibata also did Samoa Joe's walk-away spot.
Oh my god, I loved it.
And Samoa Joe stood there on the apron, and he just went...
Yeah, like, it was great camera work as well, because they cut to the sort of one that sort of shows Shibata walking away, and then over his shoulder, you do see Joe delighted. I thought it was fantastic.
I like that everyone's kind of adopting their mannerisms of all their little friends here. And I like, because this act has been, in some ways, goofy. Because you've got Shibata with the camera, and you've got them two talking about the color orange and whatever as they're on their way to kick some ass. It's a goofy presentation of people that you know could kill you.
Yeah, right.
So when you have that legitimacy to it, you can then have one guy do the silly walkaway spot and the other guy who's a killer just go, hey, this is my thing. Yeah.
But as well, because this was not a match that had stakes necessarily. It was something where they were having fun, a walk around. It allowed for that kind of thing to exist. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a lot of fun. They, as I said, each got their turns, and then finally it ended up with Shibata applying an armbar and forcing Tony Nese to tap out. This would appear to be the end of the little rivalry between this unnamed badass trio and the premier athletes, because they got shifted back over to something else later. We had backstage. Were there any other thoughts on the opening?
I haven't. Cards on the table. There's been a general election going on in the UK. I've been very focused on writing videos when I'm not here. I've got my other channel, and I haven't really caught up with a lot of AEW. So I came in today like, oh, I'm looking forward to watching this Collision, whatever. I don't really know what's going on. So I'm that casual audience that people always talk about. So you can guide me through a lot of this and explain certain things that aren't working. Because when Samoa Joe's music hit, I popped my little tits off because I was like, I forgot how much I enjoy you. You're fantastic. This match I thought was really, really great. So yeah, to know that Collision was not well received, and then to subsequently watch the show, I was like, hasn't it been good recently? I thought it's been good, but I just haven't been involved. So yeah, you can hold my hand and guide me through. But I thought this opener was great.
I thought the
main event was great as well.
One of the highlights of the show, as tends to be the case with some of these shows. The opener, the main event, the best bits. The bits in the middle, not so much. After this opener, however, we had a backstage interview with Juice Robinson and the Guns of the Bang Bang Gang with all 9 of their belts. They're getting over the fact that they are each 1/4 of the trio's champions, because math, fractions and such doesn't make sense.
I blame Luke Owen for this.
Yeah?
This is Steiner math.
Yeah, this is Steiner math. Anyway, they're upset because people want to challenge them for their belts. The Death Triangle still looking out for them, after the Double or Nothing match. and House of Black is over here, and they want a title shot, but Buddy Matthews is hurt right now, so they're kind of in the mix, but in waiting. The Christian Cage and the Patriarchy, they want a title shot, which, honestly, is more alive than the Trios division has felt for probably a year, when it was just the bang bang scissor gang and hey, let's have some pink belts that do this, and that was the joke, and it lasted way too long. At least now we've got some, pretty mean looking trios looking for these belts, and it feels like there's something to be
as a division.
Yeah, it feels like a division, and not just here is a feud with two trios going on, and that's just gonna be how it goes. I like that, because it never made sense to me that as soon as we introduced these titles, like all the trios broke up.
That is what happened, yeah.
Like Team Taz disappeared just before this. It didn't make sense. Anyway, so they go all through this, and they set up that Switchblade and Pac could see each other on opposite ends of the Owen Hart Cup. I doubt it, but there's a possibility that this feud could go that way. Then we were backstage with Lexi Nair and Top Flight Action Andretti. And Dante is going to be in the TNT Championship ladder match, and he's talking about the last time that he was in a ladder match, which was the ROH Tag Title ladder match at Supercard of Honor last year, where he did the crazy flipping Canadian Destroyer, landed, broke his leg. Horrible. It's one of the worst looking injuries I've ever seen. He talks about having to relearn how to walk, how to run, how to jump, and be inhuman, and he's going to go and he's going to win that title. And then Lio Rush comes in. And they have some history, Lio Rush tried to recruit Dante Martin years ago and didn't quite go that way, but they were a tag team for a very short amount of time, and there's history. So they're talking, and Lio and Action Andretti have a interesting little interaction, because they had wrestled for a shot at the TNT title, and Action Andretti is just like, hey, man, good job winning on Rampage last night. He was like, thank you. Back to what we were talking about, and they just set up that they're probably going to do some crazy flying stuff and see who the better man is at Forbidden Door, which, cool. You got to have some flyers in a ladder match, and these are two of the best.
You do. I also think it's interesting to use the injury, and I can't imagine what it's like to go back into the ring after you've injured your leg in such a horrific way.
That badly.
Right.
Too. Oh.
Yeah. So... It's gonna give me the willies, watching it. Every time I see, Bryan Danielson take a shot to the head, I'm like, sure. It's one of those things where it's like there's an element of drama that gets added to it. Please be safe.
Yes,
please
everyone be safe. No more broken legs, please. Then we had a trios match between Christian Cage, Nick Wayne, and Killswitch, the Patriarchy, and the Iron Savages. Now,
was that next?
It's next on my notes. I don't think it was next. It doesn't sound right, but I'll skip around. I'll do that next. It might not have happened chronologically that way. Regardless, it's a short little match. Doesn't mean too much. What's his face? Jack Jameson came out. And when this show started a year ago, I had some thoughts on these Iron Savages, formerly Bear Country. And I was like, you know what? Bear Country wasn't getting over. They were a fine little tag team you could insert into a TV show, and they'd have a decent match, but that was about it. So if you want to try something new, go for it. And they came out, and they were like, we're jacked, and we got this one guy who's straight out of the 80s, Jack Jameson, talking about, sipping sauce and being a hoss, and you got this low testosterone guy, and blah, 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 blah. And you got these other two big furry guys. And they kind of became a bit of a running meme for a little bit.
Because their gimmick was rimming.
Because their gimmick was eating ass. And they look at the nipples and all that stuff. And it's been a year now. Mm-hmm. I think I'm over the joke a little bit.
I remember when they debuted, I didn't have the context for who they were. And I was like, I love this. This is great. I liked their style. I liked their power. I liked their the way they moved. And then it all sort of became this. And then it hasn't evolved or done anything new.
Well, that was it. When it seemed like originally Collision was like this kind of split roster thing, and I was like, okay, you need more teams on the roster on Collision if that's what you're going to do. So if you're going to introduce these new young fellows, you need them to get introduced now, have them be a joke, maybe, underneath team, and eventually, maybe there'll be something. It's been a year. Maybe that's not long enough of a period to properly give them a chance. I would disagree. I think I've seen it, and maybe I'm just salty because that one match against the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass was so bad that I'll never forgive them. But I don't know if I need to see the promo time. If they just do their silly stuff in the match, maybe that's fine. Mm-hmm. But devoting promo time and TV time in excess to things that don't matter has always been strange for me, in AEW in particular. That being said, this match was an interesting little dynamic because Christian Cage went and joined commentary. This was a trios match, but 1/3 of the Patriarchy just decided, I will not take part. Meanwhile, Nick Wayne and Killswitch went down and wrestled the match on behalf of their team, and they got the win without pinning anybody. They decimated everything, and then Christian comes in, hits the Killswitch, the unprettier, and gets the win. I think that's a fun way of showing this leader who wants to take credit for everything but do as little work as possible, and how dominant this Killswitch and how talented this Nick Wayne and everything. I like that. Iron Savage's thing is fine.
In the spirit of I'm sort of a little bit out of the loop, I feel like it is also interesting to be in the now anniversary of Collision.
Yeah.
And how different things are now, all of that. I feel like the Patriarchy, Christian Cage, Killswitch, his name being changed, Christian taking advantage of all, that's very much been the situation for the year. But I still found this really entertaining. I still found this really effective. We talk a lot about getting there and things becoming stale. Is there any danger, you think, of this going too long, or is it still very much working?
I don't really think so. Is the thing, because what aspect of it could go stale? Because Christian Cage is entertaining week in and week out because he's such a good talker and he's a good wrestler, and I don't have a worry that he is going to go stale. I think this is the best position for both Nick Wayne and Killswitch to be in, so I'm not itching for them to break up.
I think there was a period of time where it was they changed Luchasaurus's name, get Luchasaurus back. There was something about, there was almost a tease a little while ago of will he, especially when he officially lost the TNT title, it was will he, turn on, and I wondered whether or not that was something that felt needed. But it does seem to me from this moment that they're all settled quite nicely into a solid little heel faction that I quite like.
Yeah.
So
I enjoy it. It's like the heel version of Jurassic Express.
Right.
That we were never going to get at the time because, gosh, Jack Perry was so cute before he had his beard. We were just never going to get that, But we've got this now, and I like Jurassic Express a lot. I like Nick Wayne. I like every component of this. I think they've got a real winning act here, and them as trios champions, I think is very fun. I don't know if that's where we're going to end up, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. So now, potentially before this match, because I think I've got my notes out of order, we had a tag team match between Private Party and Chris Jericho and Big Bill. Now, there were some moments in this match that I thought were okay, because Private Party does some cool flying, and Big Bill's pretty good. But I think Chris Jericho is the worst push wrestler on TV. I get that this gimmick is, if it's working for you, I'm happy you're entertained. It is not working for me at all. But the pushback that I always get with this sort of thing is but Chris Jericho could still have a really good match. He had that match with Shibata a couple months ago. It was really fun. Remember his ROH title run? That was really good. And I'm yeah, okay. Now he's going to put this new gimmick in a match. And granted, I don't think the gimmick changed the match at all. But Christ, this was one of the worst matches of the year. Everything about this match pissed me off. You had Chris Jericho, not even bumping half the time. They did a Code Red spot, and he just sat down.
rather than taking it. Yeah.
He was sitting down every time he took a cross body. Half the bumps, he's fallen down halfway. It looks like he's not even going to get all the way over when he's doing the lion salt anymore. Like, buddy, it's over. It's over. It's been over. Jesus, mother, God.
So it's interesting because I tempering. I didn't think it was that bad. However, I can see why you would.
It wasn't even just this. It was
a bit
like
boring.
it was way too long.
Yeah. Yes, it was very long.
This match, I could have had a birthday watching this match. There was a certain point where I think it was Isaiah Cassidy, like went to pin Chris Jericho, and the referee like held his count up, and everyone then turned on the match even more because that was 3. Boo! You made a mistake, and then you've got an F finish where Brian Keith uses brass knucks to knock out Private Party and everything. And I just, like, they hit the silly string on Chris Jericho and he couldn't take it.
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't take a DDT.
So I'm going to...
Oh, my God, this depressed me.
I'm going to play the AW Shield for a minute, which is
Please.
out of character for me. I'm again, so interested in this because... having followed Jericho's career pretty much since 1999, one of the things I've always respected about him is his ability to recognize when things are not working and shift it up. So he came back in 2007. Yeah, well, so one of the things was he was Y2J, and then he got over, and then when he became heel, my old housemate Jack used to say he got really annoyed when Jericho wouldn't just be stood there doing that. He'd come out and then he'd do that. And I was like, well, exactly, because it's annoying you. He's taking those things away. In many ways, listening to Jericho talk about his career is some of the things that have made me understand how wrestling works. That's why you're dressing like Nick Bockwinkel. That's why you're wearing a suit like this. You changed your character. That's why you're not doing those things that I remember from you as Y2J anymore, because you're not that character anymore. You're moving on. Like, that was very instructive. And I've read all of his books and followed the career. I was super excited for him, as much as I always give credit to, like, Cody and the books and Mox and all of those people for the existence of AEW. Jericho going to Japan when he was still under WWE contract, or at least in an interregnum period, is as much a part of that conversation as anything else. His presence in AEW gets the company off the ground. So, it obviously gets really tricky with the conversation about what happened at the end of last year, I suppose, and all the various allegations and stuff. So I don't want it to be that I'm brushing any of that under the rug. Speaking strictly about what we're seeing on TV, Jericho's leaning into this whole idea of, TV time and people taking advantage of his, or rather him forcing himself on storylines with younger wrestlers to get himself over, and now he's calling that the learning tree. What is it about this run that you think is not the same as shifting his attention, shifting his style to meet the moment and lean into something that's happening in the crowd to make an organic moment, and instead is just plain old bad? Does that make sense?
It does. And like, the first thing I want to say about it, which doesn't sound insightful at all, is that he did a lot of those changes, but this time it is bad.
Right.
Though the TV is bad. Previously, when, like you said, if he came out and came back in 2007 and he was Y2J again, he was like, I'm just kind of doing the same old thing. Let me change it up because this isn't what people want. He went and he did the honest man thing in the suit, and he watched a bunch of Nick Bockwinkel tapes, and he watched No Country for Old Men and combined the two and came out with a new character that to this day is maybe the best work he ever did. That's great. Won 2 Wrestler of the Year awards back to back. He was fantastic. The TV was great. The matches were great. The promos were great. Everything was great. He leaves. There's a period in the mid-2010s where a lot of it is this kind of like halfway Y2J stuff where he's coming in, and eventually he goes really over the top with it. In 2016, he brings out the list, and he's doing like the blank of Jericho. He's got the pen. He's got,
the scarf.
The scarf, the whatever, all these different things. Because he saw that, again, just being Y2J wasn't going to get him to where he needed to be, and it wasn't entertaining. He changed and became entertaining again. He then went to AEW and didn't want to be that, so he reinvented himself again and was Le Champion at the start of Dynamite when he was world champion, and he had another of the best runs that he ever had. It was great TV. The contract signing he had with Cody was fantastic. The match he had with Cody at Full Gear was fantastic. He had great matches with the younger guys that didn't need to get elevated up to the main event, but just working with him was going to be the thing that really put them in a different light. Did it with Darby, did it with Jungle Boy, did it with Scorpio Sky. He did it with everybody he needed to keep him fresh, keep the TV good, and it worked. After that is where you start to see some of these things fall apart a little bit. Because that run lasts quite long, and go watch the latest episode of TLC over on WrestleTalk where we talk about the worst match stipulations, but you start seeing things like the Mimosa Mayhem thing, where now he feels like, oh, I'm in on the bit, guys, you know?
Right.
He starts trademarking 9 different things at once. He's the demo god. He's this, that, and the other thing. And it doesn't land quite as much as it used to. And I'll still give him credit, because eventually he turns babyface and he has a little run there and he feuds with MJF, and it's a fine little babyface run. And I was very excited at the possibility of top babyface Chris Jericho, because that's something that we've never seen. He's never been on top of a promotion as a babyface. So I thought he was going to go in with some renewed vigor to really make this good. And then we got the American Top Team feud at Full Gear 2021, and it was ass, because he was making jokes about Paige Van Zant being a sex worker and taking all 5 of us and ha ha ha, and people fell off because it wasn't good. He then adjusts again, and the Jericho Appreciation Society comes along. And you know what? The first couple months of the Jericho Appreciation Society, I went, God damn it, he did it again.
Right.
How could he have possibly have renewed himself again, where they came out and they said, Jake Hager, what does the Jericho Appreciation Society mean? It means we beat up pro wrestlers. And they go and they feud with the Blackpool Combat Club. And that's a really cool thing at the start, and it goes on too long. And by the end of it, everyone's kind of sick of this Jericho thing again, because at the end of it, the TV was bad. The matches were still good, because this is when the Ring of Honor thing was happening. But after that, he just gets more and more pieces of him just start getting stripped away. And it's this Don Callis feud from last year that all of a sudden, he's linking himself to Will Ospreay. He's linking himself to Konosuke Takeshita. He's linking himself to these hot young acts. And this feud just will never friggin' end. This has been a common theme throughout a lot of his AEW tenure, is that his feuds just don't end. So people have a bit more of a tendency to get tired of them, and therefore tired of the character, because you never get the fresh injection of new talent that gets added into whatever story he's going to be doing. You lose that, and so these characters get stale that much faster. So you go further, you get whatever the hell the first half of this year was, where he was just, hey, Atlantis Jr., I knew your dad once. I'd like to wrestle you, golly gee. And you know what? Doesn't get over, because at this point, people just don't like Chris Jericho anymore. I'm not going to say that there aren't people that will hate whatever he does for whatever reason, but I'm not going to say a lot of them are wrong for thinking that way, because everybody's had their different personal journey with this guy, this character, and his career. At this point, he wasn't entertaining. And he changes this to be like, oh, in response to them chanting for me to retire, not as a bit, but as in, you suck and are the worst thing on TV every week, get this guy off our TV. His thing was, well, I'm going to be even worse. I'm going to come out there and do an annoying voice, and I'm going to do this TV time talk show segment and talk about corn getting grown. And hey guys, you don't actually know how to climb to the top rope. If you find it entertaining, I wish I was you. But none of this learning tree shtick has worked. The matches have sucked, as we saw here. The promos all suck. All his segments suck. and they're not building to anything of substance.
Okay.
Is the sort of thing, and this was a very long-winded answer to answer your question, but
it's a very comprehensive answer, and I kind of
it just has driven me absolutely nuts. Because it should, if this is the same guy, is the same brain, he should be able to adjust and make it work, because he's done it over and over and over and over and over again. He changed, was a heel, and was awesome in WCW after something wasn't working. It's been happening for almost 30 years. He's been adjusting, but this time he adjusted and got so much worse.
I think that's why I wanted to ask the question in that way and have an answer in that way. Is that it's not. It's a very comprehensive overview of why it's not working, because I think that's where my confusion lies. You know, again, leaving aside any like personal or political conversations. And purely speaking about the wrestler and his wrestling acumen and his wrestling brain, it has been confusing to me why it's not connected. And I think the reason, you know, to sum up before we have to move on to do the rest of the show, feels that it's like in the past it was all very organic and driven by identifying an issue and then altering and trying to use the medium and the performance and the characters in that. This one is more like leaning in bad faith to playing with trolling in a way that it's not like it's almost emphasizing the go away heat rather than tempering it and turning it into genuine heat, and it's a shame.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a damn shame, because it means we get matches like this.
Yes.
Yeah, they won, by the way, if I didn't mention that. Brian Keith hit Isaiah Cassidy with the brass knucks and then Jericho pinned him. Wasn't very good.
Are you also a bit hurt because Brian Keith is involved?
Yes, I am. I'm very much hurt.
Yeah.
He's the best part of this act. He gets the last line in every segment. That's the only bit that ever makes me laugh. Anyway, Sarita Deeb has a backstage promo. She talks about how going into Double or Nothing she was 6-0 and then she lost and she was unbeatable, she was unbreakable and such. And then she lost and now she's going to be back and she's going to win.
Yeah.
I don't believe her. She'll probably win next week.
She's got open challenge, isn't she?
Yeah.
Forbidden Door.
Sure.
Rebecca Quinn is all elite.
I mean, hey, I'd be more than happy to eat my words. If you want the chaotic option in all this, that'd be something else. You had a tag team squash match here. They called them the House of Black, and that made me sad because they were like the Kings of the Black Throne, as their tag as a two. Representing the House of Black, and I was like, that's so cool. What a cool name. Because they were like the PWG tag champions as that at one point, and then PWG's kind of had a rough go of things, but yeah, I mean...
That is a cool name, but it does start after a while feeling like Mark Jacobs for Mark Jacobs by Jacobs for Mark Jacobs by Jacobs for Mark Jacobs. So
sure.
I feel like, you know...
Malachi Black representing the House of Black.
Malachi Black representing
the
Kings of the Black Throne, representing House of Black is too many things.
Yeah. But it was Malachi and Brody King against LSG and MSG.
Yummy.
LSG, I know who that is. Like, I've seen him before. But regardless, it was a squash match. They killed him. Dante's Inferno was hit by Brody King. Say that sentence backwards. And then after the match, they go up to the stage, and Ian Riccaboni is going to ask them how they feel after what's happened to Buddy Matthews. And Malachi Black says, what a human question. And Brody King says, we feel nothing. I was like, okay.
Okay.
Sure. They're goofy, wacky, spooky people.
It's hard for me to feel so little about the House of Black because I actually quite like
That's it.
Especially Brody King.
Yeah. I am sad, not necessarily that I think that the Adam Copeland thing should have continued after Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
But I am sad that now he's no longer part of this show because his interactions with a lot of the House of Black guys were very good in the previous months. So it's a shame. Timmy Turner, how does that make you feel? It doesn't. Next we got Hechicero against Daddy Magic Matt Menard. Now my first question of this is I guess he's just going to be Daddy Magic forever.
Yeah.
And that's not a Jericho Appreciation Society thing. Everybody kept their Jericho Appreciation Society things. You know, like Jake Hager had his hat until the end, and Angelo Parker had his little weird comb thing. And fair enough. Sometimes you find your mojo. But this was a very quietly performed match in the sense that it had no heat, because Hechicero is awesome, and we know that. We saw him wrestle Bryan Danielson on Collision, and it was like, oh my god, this guy that I've never heard of is actually one of the best technical wrestlers in the world. He wrestled Zack Sabre Jr. over the weekend, and they had a absolute stonker of a match. Just unbelievable. Some of the counters in that you would never think even possible. But yeah, this is still a guy who is not from around these parts, and he's the kind of pushed guy in these two. He's the one that's going to win. He's got the match at the pay-per-view and everything, but that being said, he's still not going to be over with your weekly TV crowd unless you have a bit more time put into him week to week. And thus, we didn't really get that much. You know, Hechicero got a submission on Daddy Magic, just kind of stretched him and he tapped out. Daddy Magic has had his ribs taped up for like 6 months. I've forgotten what the inciting incident was there.
Couldn't tell you.
But yeah, I mean, fair enough. It was a fine little match. Hechicero's running with the Gates of Agony, which is a fun pairing, I suppose. They all look mean. And then, talk about the Chris Jericho thing that pissed me off. This pissed me off for completely different reasons. And maybe even hurt a little bit deeper because of who was involved. Because we had an AEW Continental Championship eliminator match, meaning if you pin the champion, you get a title shot, which I don't think needs to be specified, but they've got a fancy name for it, so we'll use it. Where Kazuchika Okada, the reigning champion, comes out, and he is going to wrestle Ultimo Guerrero. Now, some backstory on this. AEW apparently didn't tell Ultimo Guerrero that he was meant to wrestle under a mask.
Now, I have read about this. Hasn't he not been wrestling under a mask?
Because he doesn't wrestle under a mask.
Right.
So they made him a mask in an hour. Show me that express service. I will gladly take you up on it. But both for reasons of, I'm sure it didn't fit the best of any mask he's ever worn. And maybe they just agented this match ahead of time and really needed Okada to be messing with the mask in order for anything that we're going to plan to do to work. Because I have no idea why they did this. Maybe it's just that they put the graphic on TV and he had a mask on for some reason. But this match was not good.
Nope.
It was sloppy. It was an absolute slow, plodding little match. And Ultimo Guerrero's, bit over the hill. Yeah. Which is fair. He's a legend and such, but he can still have a good match. But boy, did you not set this guy up to have a match. And this match for Kazuchika Okada, I don't want to say it was his fault, because obviously there are a lot of other powers that be that are making this a lot more difficult than it needed to be. But to see this guy have a match like this on AEW TV, I was like, oh god, this is what they were talking about 7 months ago. Right. And I think it's going to be an outlier. I don't think he's going to have matches like this.
What do you mean?
Well, when everybody was talking about 3-star Okada coming in and being like, he needs to stay in New Japan, AEW is not the place for him.
Nakamura it.
Yes, that being the general gist of that, which I don't think has been the case. If anything, I think he's brought out other sides of his personality that we never would have expected he had. He's the greatest comedy wrestler of a generation. But this was not a good night for him. And I think nothing drove me more crazy in this match than his repeated removal of Ultimo Guerrero's mask, of which Ultimo Guerrero was just like, no, God, my face. It's like, I know what you look like. You haven't worn a mask for years. I get that that's like your reaction, muscle memory. If someone's messing with your mask, you got to protect your face and everything. But the whole finish is him taking off the mask. At one point, he just rips it off. And Ultimo Guerrero's like, oh, my face. He puts it back on. His mask is like backwards. Okada hits the Rainmaker. The mask flies off. And Ultimo Guerrero's still doing this.
Right.
It was a mess.
Yes, it was.
I saw someone say that this was an unforced error and an own goal by AEW, and I think that's a very good way to put it. This didn't need to be that bad, and if you just left these guys to their own devices, I don't think it would have been.
I think some of the questions and the conversations around AEW have been really interesting. One of them being like, what are we doing? Like, who are we being? What are we doing? Why are we, I think AEW, especially in the early days, was so exciting because it felt like it was something we haven't had and we were craving and we were desperate for, and it felt like it was full of fresh ideas, and it was so interesting. And even just look, we're in Forbidden Door season. The existence of Forbidden Door, right, was so exciting in that first, because we would never have believed that we could have something like Forbidden Door.
Forgot to mention, after that Jericho match, Samoa Joe and his crew came out to run Jericho off and challenge them to a trios match of Forbidden Door.
Right. So now Forbidden Door is just a pay-per-view, because we're having... And arguably it should, because there is an argument to be made that Forbidden Door is something where you just shoehorn in something, you put all your stories on hold, and you just have a bunch of matches for matches' sake, and that doesn't necessarily work the third or fourth time you do it. But also, if you're going to pitch it like this, then let's maybe make that part of the storyline. Let's do something. It's the same as I always talk about on WWE. If you're going to put Piper Niven situationally in the match, work backwards. We've got Forbidden Door coming up, so rather than putting everything on hold so we can do Forbidden Door, let's work it into the story. And then so that's one of the questions. The CMLL thing. If in this match you are doing, we want to get Okada over as a baddie. We want to showcase how he's got no morals, no scruples. The Elite don't care about anything or anyone. So, like, they don't respect wrestling. So they're going to rip off this luchador's mask. First of all, maybe book a luchador with a mask.
They're hard to come by.
Or just create a luchador. It doesn't have to, like... Not saying nobody knows who these people are.
Call up Fuego del Sol. What's he doing?
Or like anybody. Or I'm saying even make one that doesn't mind being unmasked, because actually they're not a masked wrestler. We just invented a wrestler.
I'll do it.
Sure, like whatever. I feel like if you want to use that to be part of it. So because then you get the whole match where Ultimo Guerrero is fiddling with the mask because he's not comfortable wearing it, because he hasn't worn one in years. And then and
it's also not his mask.
It's not his mask. And then you Google him and you see his face. So I don't really care. Like, why am I trying to hide my face? None of it made any sense. It's almost. And then the question is, do the CMLL people really count? Like, why are they here? That's a whole other conversation that's been happening. Then also I have my thing about, we're on the anniversary of Collision. The reason I used to love Collision was because it felt interesting. It felt different within the company that felt different. You know, It was like it had its own flavor. Collision was my show. And we had two great bookend matches with a little bit in between. There was a lot of emphasis on tag team wrestling. There was a lot of emphasis on just interesting, matchups and stuff like this. Whereas now you've done two in a row, the Daddy Magic, and then this match where I'm like, what's this? Yeah. What's this? What's Collision? I resent sometimes sitting down to watch it because it's not the exciting... granted, hopefully this episode is an outlier. And as I said, while I haven't necessarily been keeping up week to week, I have been hearing that Dynamite has been doing gangbusters.
Great episode this past week.
That's great. That's a wonderful thing. These things do happen. These things are cyclical. But I think we're seeing the convergence of a lot of those questions in this moment. And it is weird.
Hey, it's how I used to be. Like, I went through the whole downfall of Rampage. I watched Rampage at the beginning, and it was like my favorite show of the week, because it was an hour, and you'd get 3 matches, and they'd all be good. You were getting matches like the first Pac and Andrade match, and it was absolutely nuts. And you're getting a 5-star Young Bucks Lucha Brothers match, and there was always something. They did Adam Cole and Hangman Page for the world title on Rampage. There was always something to look forward to, and eventually it just felt less and less special until now it's just the people that are left over. I don't want Collision to be that.
Nah. But it kind of is.
It kind of is. And granted, we will get to the main event shortly, because I do think the main event is an example of, like, okay, they set something up on Dynamite, paid it off on Collision. That's better than usual. But there is a feeling that what happens on Collision is kind of contained within this show. And you might get some things that are spun off of things that happened on Dynamite, but the thing that happens on Collision doesn't really usually lead to what's going to happen on Collision next week. They're all a bunch of kind of shows in a vacuum, one by one, and it doesn't give you much of a reason to tune into the next show when this one's over.
Whereas it used to be, we're back at the Owen, it used to be kind of by necessity, because they were keeping the rosters relatively separate.
Yeah.
It used to be that I was like, okay, if I want to hear from Ricky Starks and Big Bill, I got to tune in next week. Or if I want to hear from Punk, or if I want to hear from Joe, like,
Yeah.
It very much used to be, you want to watch Collision for a reason. Now it just feels like Collision is Sunday Night Heat.
A little bit. Yeah, it is what it is. We got a video package, a very emotional video package, from Jeff Jarrett to answer the question of all those on Twitter who are uneducated swine that would ask why Jeff Jarrett is in the Owen Hart Cup. Obviously, it's because they were tag partners.
They were very
and best
good
friends.
mates.
I will let you know right now that I booked Jeff Jarrett in my Hardy Boys fantasy booking warfare thing last year, part of the Owen Hart Cup, and I was like, oh God, I don't want to beat him in that tournament. Oh God. So it's in there. You know, this is an important thing. The Owen Hart Cup should mean a lot, and there's a lot of top names in this year's tournaments, both sides, and Jeff Jarrett being involved, he cut this promo about how he wanted to look at Oj, and I can't remember what Owen's daughter's name is, Ophelia, I think her name is, maybe, and say, your daughter was a great man, because they were kids when this horrible thing happened, and now they're grown, and I get to look at them and say, your father was a great man. And then he talks about how Toby Keith passes away, but he's got a song that says, I'm not as good as I once was, but for once, I'm good as I ever was. And that's going to be me in this tournament. Because I may not be the same Jeff Jarrett that was a 12-time world champion in days of yore, but goddamn, for one night, I can't be. And I was like, he's got to go to Wembley. He's going to win the title at Wembley.
But this was something where I was like, again, it's like, oh, this is a little outlier. This is the stuff. This is lovely. Like, it was one of Jeff Jarrett. I have a lot of time for. Jeff Jarrett's great. I think picking him up was a really smart choice. I think he's done an awful lot of great work. The comedy stuff. I was pushing for him to get a little tag title run for a little while there during that period last year. But I think also he gets it. And actually a use for this tournament, or rather a use of him in this tournament, the fact that he's up against Wildcard would suggest he's probably not going to be in there for
probably
an
not
time, which I think is a little shame. I think on the strength of this, it would be a really good opportunity for him to get all the way to the final, have him come out with the guitar and Deborah, you know, and
wow,
you know, who still does the rounds and she posts that she's in various conventions and things like that. I don't know if she would be interested, but something about the pair of them coming out and putting over a young talent in the final to win the Owen, and it be like, I see something in you. I know you could do something really special with that.
This promo makes me go like, God damn, you should at least make the semis.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I don't think he's going to.
I don't think so either, but I think this is again where I'm like, you're a company where I believe that you have the forethought, and I actually also believe you have the empathy to do something like this. And I think it would be really nice if they did. I think it would be interesting, but we'll see. I
agree. We had a tag team match here with Toni Storm and Mariah May taking on legit Layla Hirsch and Lady Frost. I've missed Layla Hirsch.
Yeah.
I was really enjoying her rise like 2 years ago whenever she turned on Chris Statlander, and that was looking like she was going to be a bit of a player, and then got hurt, and we didn't see her for a long, long time. But here she is. They had this little tag match. It was a match for Toni Storm and Mariah May to win, and so they did. And, like, it was fine. It was a good, solid little match, I suppose. Not a ton of heat for it, outside of people really being into Toni Storm. But they were really playing up a lot of the Mariah May, Toni Storm synergy. Because for as long as they've been together, they haven't had very many, like, tag team matches or anything like that. It's always been, here's Mariah, here's Toni, they're in each other's corners or whatever. But seeing them as a in-ring act together allowed them to do a lot of things that you wouldn't normally get a chance to see. Toni Storm went and like covered Mariah May on a moonsault and protected her, so she took the impact and then later broke up the pin. There was that sort of thing. They were posing as they were going to the commercials. They did a both Irish whip at each other, and they kind of like stopped each other and then went and traded partners and attacked them. So there was a bit more to play with here than we would normally see from just either one of them as a singles. But a pretty, standard match regardless. Toni hit Layla with the Storm Zero, and Mariah got the pin.
I got annoyed at the Toni covers Mariah to take the brunt of the moonsault and then is up and quick enough to break up the pinfall.
Yeah, I didn't
understand
the spot very much.
Like I understood what they were going for.
Yes, 100%. But the fact that Mariah May was still damaged enough from the moonsault to not kick out of the moonsault, but Toni Storm, who got the brunt of it, supposedly, was the one to break it up. I was like, I feel like this is a bit backwards.
Also, like, just knock her off the top rope. What are you lying down for? What are you taking that move for? You don't need to. Like, there was a logical inconsistency in that I didn't appreciate. But you know, character-wise, I get what they're doing. So,
yeah.
And
then we had our main event, which was Will Ospreay versus Brian Cage for the AEW International Championship. And thank God, because this show needed something to get it back on track. And I say back on track, it's more like this show needed something to latch onto it and pull it all the way to the station. Because this match was quite good. Shocker. It's Will Ospreay having a TV title match. Yeah, it's going to be good. So they were doing a bunch of different things here. Obviously, Brian Cage, big, strong boy, and he was throwing Will Ospreay around. He was curling him and then dumped him over his head and posed and did his Brian Cage things. He, at this point, is just kind of trying moves every once in a while, and a lot of the time they're mean and ugly, but in a really good way. Where Will Ospreay went for a Hurricane Run off the top rope at a point in this match, and Brian Cage kind of held on, and Ospreay like kind of fumbled and tried to climb back up, and Brian just picked him up, stepped in like a foot or so away from the corner, and then did basically Jeff Cobb's Tour of the Islands, where he did like a spinning power slam off the ropes, and that got a near fall. That was very, very good. The ending of this match came when Will Ospreay hit the Stun Dog Millionaire, the Poison Rana, and then the Os Cutter for a near fall, and then removed his elbow pad and hit the Hidden Blade. So that was very good. And I like that they've been setting up this sort of idea of like Will Ospreay's finishers and that sort of thing. And I think they've done a very effective job in setting up sort of like the tier of his finishers as far as AEW TV goes, where Hidden Blade, most of the time will get the pin. Os Cutter, probably not a lot of the time, could pull it out. He lists it among his finishers, but more often than not, probably a near fall. The Stormbreaker, that's a finish. The Tiger Driver, that's the super finisher that you only do like once a year and will break your neck. I like that they have shown this progression and done it in a real natural way over the course of time. That bit has been very good, and this was a very solid little match to end the show.
It was. I really, really enjoyed it. I also agree completely on the finisher thing, because you should ultimately have your finisher move. That is why it's called a finisher. That should be the one that no one will ever kick out of. But within that, you should also have a selection of moves in your arsenal that can get you the win on TV, especially if not at a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And I think the one of the negatives of the past few years has been NXT face and the idea of being able to kick out of everything. And you know, it should only be... I remember in The Rock's book, he talks about how in the main event of WrestleMania 15, him and Austin both agree to kick out of each other's finishes, and how that is not done, how that is wild. And it's like, where are we now? So I really like in this, everything you outlined there about Will Ospreay's like 6 or 7 potential match finishing moves. It makes those moments that people kick out of an Os Cutter mean a bunch.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you might if you look on a certain day, that might win it. Plus Brian Cage is great.
Yeah.
Massive.
I got a lot of time for Brian Cage. He's a really good wrestler.
Yeah.
You know, he had a real weird run in AEW, and a lot of people were like, oh, they got to get him out of here and do this and that. And I was like, okay, but this to me is sort of the level that he's at. Like, he was Impact champion, and you can be Impact champion and that sort of thing. If you're going to be on the big TV show, like an AEW show and whatnot, I think being like a guy that can go out there and be different from everybody else and put on great matches, because he's a really good wrestler. And how many guys do you see that are giant, jacked up bodybuilder looking guys that can also put on a match, you know, like this? He's a great base for flying guys.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of time for him in his matches. Chokes me up a little bit. Big fan. But that's going to bring Collision to an end.
That's it. It's been a
not a great show.
Not a great show. A lot of annoying stuff. Some nice stuff in there, but
Yeah.
not vintage.
Overall, if you're gonna watch one show, watch SmackDown.
It's a SmackDown win.
It's
I'm
a
afraid
SmackDown win.
win.
SmackDown wins this week in a 10-8 round. You know, it wasn't close.
It was not.
That being said, let us know what you think one way or the other, particularly about Jacob Fatu and the impact that he could have on the Bloodline and WWE stories going forward. We will be back tomorrow with our Raw review podcast. Dan and lovely Luke together again. We will see you then.
Interesting lineup on Raw tomorrow. We've got a hell of a lot going on, so you're going to want to be there.
Indeed, you won't want to miss it. So make sure you tune in then, like this video, and subscribe and enable notifications so you will be notified when it goes live. I've been Tempest, that has been Dan, and that was your weekly review roundup.
Weekend
jam.
update. It's right there.